How's it going, everyone? I hope you guys are having a great day. As today, we're going to talk about our next few snowstorms that are expected to impact the eastern United States. So let's first begin with this potential winter storm we could see develop right around the Tuesday timeframe. So we do have a flanking jet stream that's bringing that cooler air further southward, interacting with that warm Gulf of Mexico air mass that's also very lightly dense. So of course, this humid air mass will rise up into the upper levels of the atmosphere, condense, and we'll see a pretty significant area of snowfall as well as rainfall to the south of this rain snow line that's located right around the Tennessee-Kentucky border, and we see that it's producing a heavy amount of snowfall. So we're around 140 hours out from this event occurring for much of the Ohio Valley and Northeast. So there's still, of course, there could still be changes with the forecast, and quite significant changes even with the forecast that's around 5 to 6 days out. I know in a lot of my other forecasts I go up to the 10-day mark, but even as short of a time span as the 5 to 6 day mark, we're still bound to see significant changes. However, the thing that's making me a bit more confident with this forecast, despite the fact that we still have around 5 to 6 days out for the forecast to adjust, is that the European model is also forecasting a very similar scenario and developing this storm system in a very similar fashion. So taking a look at the European model at the same forecast hour, let's take a look at the 12Z run, because as of right now, only the 12Z run goes a little bit more into the long-term future, but we see develops in a very similar fashion. We do have a small area of snow showers still lingering around the Midwest, which is what the GFS model is also forecasting. And we do see the snowfall develop for much of the mid-Atlantic, and it is very similarly heavy as what the GFS model is forecasting. The trajectory is very similar. The exact position of the jet stream is very similar. So this is making me believe that this storm system has a higher likelihood of developing in this sort of fashion and moving in this sort of direction. So what could that mean for the Midwest and the Northeast? So first thing, in terms of the changes, the most significant change I see with the European model compared to what the GFS model is stating is that at least in the Midwest or just north of the Ohio Valley, the area of snowfall doesn't move as far northward. It's mainly impacting a small, narrow area right around the Cincinnati area, and like I said, just north of the Ohio Valley, rather than extending as far northward into cities like Indianapolis or even further northward into Columbus, Ohio. We still could see snowfall in those areas. We're definitely going to need to pay close attention to how fast the instability builds over the Midwest, because the stronger we see the instability, at least earlier on, of course, we're more likely to see a more expansive area of snowfall earlier on. So that's definitely going to be key. We're going to need to see how much cold air will really be behind this upper level low as it continues to head further southward. But if both the European model and the GFS model are agreeing with this sort of scenario, in terms of what you should expect in the Northeast, we should expect a pretty significant winter storm where we be talking about anywhere between 6 to 10 inches of snowfall in a scenario like this. This includes cities like New York City, Boston, Hartford, Connecticut, and Philadelphia, at least initially speaking, should get accumulating snowfall as well. It will be less because eventually it should turn into a rain event for some of these cities like in Philadelphia and Washington, D.C., as well as Baltimore, but you still should experience quite a bit of accumulating snowfall, initially speaking, for this to still be a significant winter storm that you need to pay attention to over the next few days. And continuing to move forward, we see that snowfall will impact Boston for quite a long period, really, where we just see extremely heavy snowfall for several hours, and it's entirely a snow event for Boston. So if this were to be the scenario which the computer models are currently agreeing on right now, this would easily be one of the more significant winter storms we've seen in the Northeast in quite a long time. As to put that in perspective, at least where I'm at in northern New Jersey, we haven't received a snowstorm that brought over 7 inches of snowfall since 2021. So it's been 4 years since a lot of these areas experienced snowfall this heavy or snowstorm this impactful, and there is that possibility. Again, I need to still point out we're still 150 hours out. There's still a lot of time that could change between now and the Tuesday timeframe of next week, but it's giving me a bit more confidence that now we know both of the computer models are taking a very similar forecast. Let me show you guys the GFS model again. When it comes to this snowstorm forecast, we see very similar, at least in the Northeast. The snowfall doesn't move as far northward, and another key thing to point out is that the GFS model doesn't expect Philadelphia and even Baltimore and mostly Washington, D.C. to experience any sort of rain out of this. It'll be entirely a snow event for those cities. So if you're hoping for a little bit more snowfall in places like Philadelphia and Washington, D.C. and Baltimore, then the GFS model would be your best bet. It really all depends on how strong the ridging is just to the south of this storm system, because of course the stronger the ridging, the stronger the southerly flow will be, which would make it more likely to experience a rain event. However, I also should point out that in a scenario like this, we'd also see lighter snowfall rates. So I would say that the peak snowfall would be a little bit lower compared to the European model, even though the snowfall is focusing in a little bit further southward, but it still should be a significant winter storm threat regardless of what the GFS model or the European model is stating, because we still do see heavy snow bands associated with this specific snowstorm in the GFS model scenario. So there's still time to really see how this forecast will unfold. Definitely we won't get a good idea until, I'll say, this weekend snowstorm moves through, which I'll get a little bit more in detail with in a second, because that's when we'll really know how strong the ridging will build to the west of this storm system. It really all depends on how strong that pressure gradient is and really how strong this low is as well. So I'll certainly keep you guys updated once we get a bit more confidence with the forecast, but I am confident we will see some sort of major winter storm right around the Tuesday timeframe. It really, there are still questions regarding who exactly will experience the heaviest snowfall and how far north this low pressure system is. But for a forecast that's 5 days out, this is a good sign that they're at least taking a forecast that's at least around the ballpark. So that definitely does increase the confidence with this forecast. Now, moving on to the potential snowstorm that could happen after this one, which I think also has the possibility of, believe it or not, to be even more impactful for much of the Northeast. So we see that the right behind this low pressure system, there's going to be another small upper level low that's going to move through, that's going to enhance the northerly flow and enhance the instability in general once again. And that's where we could see our next significant winter storm develop, where in the Midwest we see that this is mostly light snowfall. I wouldn't expect much out of this, but it becomes a different story by the time it approaches the Northeast, where the snowfall does become quite heavy. There is plenty of instability for this storm to intensify, enhance those heavier snow bands. And the forecast in this is even more unconfident, because if we were to take a look at the European models forecast at around the same forecast hour, again, let's go to 12-0, that's the forecast. Does go a little bit more long term. We see that the European model doesn't develop much of anything, and the primary reason is that the ridging just to the east of this storm system will be weaker, which would mean that there won't be enough instability for this storm system to really absorb that humid air mass in the lower levels and really condense it to where that snowfall will expand, and we would see heavier snow totals associated with a storm like this. So let's take a quick look at the instability. We do see there is a little bit of instability, but take a look at the isobars. We see that they're primarily moving from westerly to easterly direction. Compare that to the GFS model at around the same time period. We see just a slight bit more of an angle to where the isobars are facing a little bit more from southwesterly to northeasterly direction, which is representative of a higher amount of instability. And look at this, just overall, the ridging is a lot stronger and just more instability. Again, taking a look back at the European model at the same time period. So let's get out of this. So at the 06Z run on Thursday, February 13th, compare that to the European model, you're clearly going to see that the instability won't be as strong at around the same time period. So let's take a look at that. So look at this. There isn't anywhere nearly as much instability. The ridging is a lot weaker. And the thing is because the European model expects this upper level low located right just north of this ridge to move a lot more slowly. So or at least sticks around a little bit longer. So that will weaken the possibility that this ridge could grow a lot stronger. While if we were to take a look at the GFS model at the same time period, this upper level low is already well to the east, which will allow this ridge to grow a lot stronger and enhance instability. So the key thing will be this upper level low right here, which we won't get a good idea of where it'll be and how fast it'll move until, I'll say, the Monday time frame of next week. That will determine how fast it'll move, and the faster it moves, the more likely we're going to see another major winter storm for Northeast. And taking a look back at what the GFS model is forecasting when it comes to that winter storm, it would be quite significant for much of the Midwest and Northeast, where we'd potentially be talking about feet of snow rather than inches in portions of New England and the interior Northeast. But the ridging is still just a bit too strong for a lot of the cities further southward, like New York City, Philadelphia, and Washington, D.C. So see much accumulating snowfall from this, if at all, as it looks like it's entirely a rain event for Philadelphia, Washington, D.C. So the amount of ridging will be key in determining where exactly that rain snow line is. I'll get a bit more detail once we get a bit more confidence with this specific winter storm. It's still a bit too early to go too in detail with it, but definitely stay tuned for further updates when it comes to this storm. And there could be another winter storm right behind it. I won't go too much into detail with this one because this is even more in the long-term future, and the European model is showing a similar forecast, but there's still quite a bit of differences between them, so I won't go too much in detail. Just be aware of that going into next week. It's going to be a long week, most likely, when it comes to winter storms throughout the United States. So now let's talk about winter storms that will happen in the very short-term future. So short-term that I don't even know if I should call it short-term, because it's going to happen within the next few hours, like in about 6 hours from now. So at this point, if you're expecting to receive snowfall in the Northeast, you need to prepare as if you're going to experience it. It's at this point guaranteed at this point. Both the computer models, the GFS and the European model, are in strong agreement with each other with this. So don't hope that there's going to be a strong amount of uncertainty, because it's highly certain at this point. So definitely prepare in a lot of these areas. Now, this will develop off of a low pressure system moving through from a clipper system, and there is a decent amount of cold air behind it. We also have a decent amount of cold air just to the east of this low pressure system, so that should also enhance the instability on both sides, and it's the reason why this storm system, when it comes to snowfall, will be rather front-loaded, because the cold air will come from the east, not necessarily much from the west. So definitely watch out in New York City, where you should expect anywhere between 1 to 3 inches of snowfall. For much of upstate New York, I'll say it'll be more like 3 to 5. And then for New England, it should be 3 to 5 inches. The storm system should get a little bit more intense by the time it approaches New England. It should encounter a bit more instability once it encounters more of that cooler air mass. So we should see the heavier snow bands focus in more right over New England, in places like Boston, New Hampshire, Vermont, much of Massachusetts, of course, and even into Maine. That's where you should expect the heaviest snowfall, where I'd expect a large area of 3 to 5 inches of snowfall to potentially 5 to 8 inches more so in the higher elevations of these areas. So definitely prepare for this. The snowfall should begin in the overnight hours or in the early morning hours on Thursday for much of New York City, before eventually moving into New England, I'll say right around late morning to the afternoon time on Thursday, pretty much lasting until Thursday evening. So definitely be prepared for this all throughout New England. So here's the current snowfall forecast for the Northeast at this time and even the Midwest. So, like I said, expect 1 to 3 inches of snowfall for New York City, more like 3 to 5 inches in Boston, because like I said, those heavier snow bands will develop the further eastward this storm system moves in the higher elevations, of course, of the Adirondacks and other areas of the Appalachian Mountain ranges. You should expect more like 5 to 8. Burlington around 3 to 5 inches or 1 to 3 inches of snowfall. Albany more like 3 to 5 inches. So definitely be prepared for this for your Thursday morning commute, because even a snow total as little as 1 to 3 inches of snowfall could make a big difference when it comes to your morning commute. So definitely prepare for that and prepare to shovel potentially for Thursday morning. So definitely be aware of that throughout the Northeast. And then for the Midwest, from the same clipper system, it should be mainly lighter snow, maybe around an inch for Detroit, Green Bay, and northern Minnesota. So definitely keep that in mind as well. I also need to point out the possibility of freezing rain, which could be a concern for the higher elevations of Pennsylvania into Maryland, as well as the eastern portion of West Virginia and going into Ohio. This is where you should expect anywhere between 1/10 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch of ice, which is still quite a bit dangerous to drive on the roadways at this time period. So in cities like Cleveland, Pittsburgh, and into Erie, Pennsylvania, definitely watch out for that ice accumulation threat. Into Chicago as well. Detroit should get involved with ice accumulation as well. Definitely be prepared for this significant freezing rain threat from this winter storm as well. And moving on to another winter storm that should happen more so in the short-term future, we do have another low pressure system that's going to come off the Pacific Northwest coast, bring some snowfall for much of the Rocky Mountains and the upper Midwest. It should be right around 1 to 3 inches of snowfall for those areas before it eventually intensifies by the time it approaches the Northeast, where I expect this winter storm to be more significant than the one we're going to see tonight. The snowfall should be a little bit more southward, so New York City should get a bit more involved with snowfall, as well as the areas that might have missed out on this first winter storm that's going to happen later tonight. And then we should still see very heavy snowfall over much of New England. So, like I said, I expect this to be more significant. You should expect a large area of 3 to 5, or more like 5 to 8 inches of snowfall for New England. The snow bands should be quite heavy, and the European model is also showing a very similar forecast, which is definitely giving this forecast a bit more confidence, and I am confident it will develop in this sort of fashion. There's very few differences between the two computer models, and we're less than 4 days out from this event occurring, so the confidence is definitely relatively high when it comes to this storm system, and we could even see very, very heavy snow bands like what the European model is stating, where we could be talking about maybe a foot of snowfall if this forecast were to come for fruition. We're definitely going to need to pay close attention to how rapidly this intensifies. I'll say that's the only bit of uncertainty we have when it comes to this storm system by the time it approaches the Northeast, so definitely keep that in mind for southern New England and the Northeast in general. But definitely be prepared for this. In terms of the amount of snowfall you should expect, let's first take a look at the GFS model's snowfall forecasts for this second storm system at least. So let's move on to that. We see that this is for the first snowstorm. It shouldn't snow that far southward. Just keep that in mind. The GFS model counts sleet as snowfall accumulation, which isn't necessarily accurate, but pay close attention. We, like I said, we could see a large area of 5 to 8 inches of snowfall on top of what we already experienced. So let me keep that in mind for Northeast and New York City as well. But that's it for now, guys, and I thank you guys for watching.